Imagination Connoisseurs, episode number 567 of Robservations, the show about something, is brought to you by the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. Remember, tomorrow, December 1st at 11:59 p.m., and I guess 59 seconds, is the last day you have to enter the film festival. If you get your entry and the entry fee in by tomorrow at 11:59, you have until December 15th to get your finished film into the festival. I look forward to seeing that film. And speaking of movies, the film I worked on with John Campia, Movie Trailers, A Love Story, is now available at Amazon to our North American and UK viewers, and to the rest of the world, you can get it on Vimeo on demand. If you love movie trailers, this is the documentary for you. It is currently available to rent or buy everywhere. Well, greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Master of Fun and Wonder, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Archbishop of Banterbury, your Sommelier of Cinema and Sci-Fi, your Chancellor of Cheerfulness, your Pharaoh of Physical Media, and something new someone hung on me recently, your Gatekeeping Twat. That's right, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, the existential Mr. Rogers, and I am once again coming at you, robcasting at you from this, the observatory. Actually, it's the Robservatory where I observe things. So it's the Robservatory, not just the observatory, but you already knew that. Anyway, welcome to this, the 567th episode of Robservations, the show about something. Every number that I add just seems more like it's science fiction to me. Not only can I not believe that I've done this many shows, I can't believe I've done so many shows that you people are still watching, that I haven't been run off the airwaves. Although, that's getting increasingly more more of a possibility. And I was thinking about that. You know, I've been talking a lot about whether the last show I did on Saturday about toxic fandom, I get a lot of pushback from Star Trek fans on the web. They talk about my opinion of Star Trek Discovery being toxic in itself. And Sean Pullen, who I've been going back and forth with on Twitter, had an interesting idea for me. He was talking about, yes, I was on a Midnight's Edge podcast where we were reviewing the last couple of episodes of Discovery yesterday. And there was a lot of people say, oh, you guys can be an echo chamber. And that's true. And Sean had an idea, and I think it's a good idea. And I'm going to throw this out there to anybody. An open invitation to come on this show live. And if you are tired of me banging around about Star Trek Discovery or disagree with me about anything on this show, and you would like to correct me or offer your point of view, I would like to send an open invitation to anyone who wants to come on this show. And as you all know, there are many examples of how I interact with other people live, either watching on the show, or you can go watch pre-recorded interviews that I have done with people, such as current WGA president and executive producer of The Orville, David Goodman. You can see me talking to Hannibal producer and Star Trek Discovery co-creator Brian Fuller. They're on the channel, they're on the playlists, they're the interviews that you can watch, and you can see sort of where my interview style is coming from and what you could expect when you have a conversation with me here. Now, I will freely admit, going live on YouTube and having discussions like this is not something that everybody is necessarily adept at. And when we're going to be having a conversation, it will be live. So we will be taking live questions from the audience. But I assure you, I am very easy to talk to as I stumble across that idea. I am very easy to talk to, and I'm very much open to listening to your points of view. All I ask is that whenever we talk, you don't make it personal. You can make it personal if you want, but I don't think that's conducive to a live discussion. But a lot of people do. I find that when I'm having a dissenting view of Star Trek Discovery, there's a lot of people who eventually just come after me on a personal level. That's fine. If you do want to be personally insulting live to me, you're perfectly welcome to do that. But I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback, and I do hope you have enough examples to back up your unfavorable opinions about me. So if you do want to come on live and call me a gatekeeping twat like this person, hey, you know what? If people are making memes of you on the internet like this, I actually kind of feel that that is maybe a victory in some way, because not only are people listening to you or following you, but they've had that you've elicited that kind of an emotional response where they actually put keyboard and fingers to walking across that keyboard to create memes of you that they can then later tweet publicly, which I think is pretty interesting. Now, I say some controversial things, I say some stupid things, and some things I say for effect, I don't know, just to, I'll admit it, just to troll a response from some people. I've done that before. I mean, I think that's kind of, when you're on Twitter and you're on the internet, I think that's part of it, to be honest. I think that kind of behavior is definitely something that is part of it, but we all kind of understand that, especially in fan circles. But I tend to have very dissenting views from certain people, and I have no problem with that. But at this point, I'm getting a lot of people that are, really taking me to task and publicly stating their active dislike of me, which I find so interesting because clearly they don't watch this channel. They're not part of this community, or maybe they have watched this channel and they don't like what they see. But either way, I would just like to extend an olive branch and an invitation to come on the show. Now, I'm not just going to open this up to anybody. You've got to write me a cogent letter that proves with how you state your ideas that I would want to have you come on the show, because it doesn't matter if you have a dissenting point of view. If you're not good live on YouTube and we can't have that kind of a discussion, then it's sort of counterproductive. So I would ask, if you do want to come take me to task, that you have the kind of personality that would, say, survive an hour live on YouTube. That's all I ask. And that's up to you to decide. That's not up for me to decide. Because if it doesn't work out, you're the one that's coming on this channel. You're accepting my invitation. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, because a lot of people are always taking me to task. If you want to ask me questions about Axanar, if you want to ask me questions about filmmaking, if you want to ask me questions about my vitriolic hatred of Star Trek Discovery and what's been done to the Star Trek franchise since 2009, and why I think it's not making money, even though people are saying it is. I can't believe that it is, but maybe I'm wrong. So come on and tell me I'm wrong. Bring your facts. Back it up. Can't wait. Look forward to it. And that being said, let's just jump right into what you guys have to say. You guys, you girls, you gentle beings, however you identify across the 28 known galaxies. I just figured, hey. Oh, but you know what? You know what? I would be remiss if I did not mention that tomorrow is supposed to be the last day that Quibi exists. Now, for many of you, you know I was banging on about Quibi for quite some time. But according to them, Quibi did announce, after they announced they were shutting down, that they were expecting to be gone sometime on or around December 1st. Now, I don't have Quibi. I never signed up for Quibi. I knew this was going to happen, as you all know, so I figured, what was the point? But I am really interested to see what happens to Quibi's content. And we've talked a lot about how when it aired once, the content ownership would revert back to the creators. So I am going to be keeping my eyes and ears open over the next couple months to find out what exactly happened to all that very expensive content that they made for Quibi. Was it acquired by somebody else? Did various creators get to place their material elsewhere? Did somebody else pick up a Quibi show that they liked for a second season or even a third season? How did that all work? I'd love to know too, was it pay or play? Like if Quibi decided to bring you on, Did they have to pay your contract off, or could they opt out? I'm very curious to see what happens to Quibi in its own aftermath. So, just saying, thought that would be interesting to discuss. Omar94 takes us off. Let's see. Now, he was talking, this is a couple days old, but Omar says, "Hi, Rob. More movie anniversaries are upon us. November 27th, 2020 marks 2 movie anniversaries, the first being the 35th anniversary of Rocky IV, which released on November 27th, 1985. Wow. I was in college. 1985 was a good year for Sylvester Stallone, as he starred in 2 of the top 10 highest-grossing films of the year, Rocky IV and First Blood Part 2. The latter film celebrated its 35th anniversary back on May 22nd of this year, and now it's Rocky's anniversary. I don't dislike Rocky IV, as there are good individual moments and scenes, but overall I found it just all right. The second film is the 100th anniversary of The Mark of Zorro, starring Douglas Fairbanks Sr., which released on November 27th, 1920. I was not a fan of this film, unfortunately. I wish I was, but I'm not, as I found the film to be dry and uninteresting. Just a heads up, it's a silent movie. Well, it would have to be, because there was no sound film in 1920. Even if it was in sound, I don't think I would have liked it. That's not to say I dislike silent films, as there are those I like, such as Fritz Lang's Metropolis and both Charlie Chaplin's City Lights and Modern Times. But Mark of Zorro was not one of them. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Omar, I have to say, I really do love when you send in these letters. They do please me greatly. So thank you for that. This one comes from Levi Old Elk. Ooh, I remember your first letter. Hello once again. This is my second letter ever. Will it be a recurring thing? I hope so. I hope so too. As I have no plans to stop listening to your episodes, and I love the topics and opinions you and others have. The last time I wrote you, I mentioned in response to my letter that you would. Oh, you mentioned in response to my letter that you would love to visit Montana and hit us up, and we would be glad to guide you through the wild and untamed forest moons of Endor. The main reason I'm writing to you today is, since you are the pharaoh of physical media, I'm wondering if you have a copy of a film from New Zealand called Naming Number 2, starring the late Ruby Dee and directed by Toa Fraser. I do not. I recently looked it up online, and they have changed the title to simply Number 2. The first time I watched it was during the Sundance Film Festival in 2006, and I fell in love with this movie ever since, but sadly, it was never released in the United States, and ever since then, I've searched for it online to no avail. One would think it would be on YouTube by now, right? Although in some places it is listed as out of print or no longer in stock, and I was wondering if you would be able to help me in my quest to finally obtain this very rare DVD, or dare I hope, Blu-ray. Being Native American, and the story involves the natives of the region country of New Zealand, the Maori, I simply love the film, and I've never given up hope that one day I'd be able to watch it again. And that, P.S. DS9 rules. Well, I'll tell you something, Levi Old Elk. When I was working on Lord of the Rings, I was really interested in Jeff Murphy's The Quiet Earth. Jeff Murphy also directed another great movie about the Maori called Utu. And if you haven't seen Utu, it's great. It's a historical piece about a Maori warrior, and it's really, really good. I really like movies about the Maori culture. Also, Lee Tamahori's Once Were Warriors is a great film. I would suggest, when I was down in New Zealand, I was staying at a place that I don't believe exists anymore in Wellington, the Duxton, and it was almost right across the street. I could see outside my window of the New Zealand Film Commission office. And I would try and go there because I wanted to buy the rights to put out The Quiet Earth on at the time it was DVD. But I could never, no one was ever there. But maybe the New Zealand Film Commission can point you in the direction of the film, or where you could get it. It might only be available domestically. I don't know if it is. So if anyone out there has any information about the film Naming Number 2, starring the late Ruby Dee and directed by Toa Fraser, please send it in. Now it's just simply called Number 2. and I can hit up Levi Old Elk and try and get some information to him. I love it when people want to find movies like that. I feel it's kind of like my sacred duty almost to find somebody their film that they want to see. So Levi, I will look that up and see where it comes to, or what comes of it. Pedro Ferreira is here. Pedro says, I was in your live stream of your last podcast about Discovery. First, I just want to say that calling that sequel to Unification is a disgrace. I just want to add something here, Rob. For years and years, I was always treated terribly by people due to my disabilities. And I never knew why I was always picked on. Not having anyone to talk to, not having the therapy to get my problems talked about really messed me up. Today, thanks to those therapy sessions, I'm beginning to understand things a bit better. Talking about it does indeed help. My point is, there's nothing wrong with family support or wanting therapy for issues. But the difference is, Alex Kurtzman's Trek cheats. It doesn't construct fleshed-out characters, but ciphers for its own twisted brand of what's cool at the moment. Psychological help is not earned. It's given away as a token so characters can learn what the moral of the day is. It's fake. It's contrived like everything on that awful series. Am I right in thinking Discovery doesn't teach people to better themselves, but accept their flaws as a call sign? In that case, does that mean no one is willing to learn new skills or improve themselves? I have my problems, which I'm not required to take complete responsibility for, but I will always try and improve myself. By the way, don't listen to that numpty Justin. It's my subjective opinion, but I feel he's the twat. Kind regards, Pedro. Well, Pedro, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I don't understand. You know, Star Trek to me was elitist in that it believed that you had to step up to the plate and you had to do better. And the idea was that people were on Federation starships because they were already the best of the best. You had to be when you're out there on the final frontier exploring unknowns like this or that or whatever. I was just quoting Star Trek The Motion Picture. And that's what I don't understand. I mean, I don't see the characters in Star Trek Discovery. One of the big problems I have with the show is I don't believe any of them would survive very long in the final frontier. And I mean, there's so much emotionalism and insubordination in that show, and there has been from the very beginning. That's one of my problems. You know, somebody said something to me the other day. When I was a kid, I wanted to be Captain Kirk, and I wanted to know Leonard McCoy and Spock. Hell, I want to be Scotty or even Ensign Riley. I don't want to be any of the people on Discovery. And it has nothing to do with race or gender. I just think they'd all get me killed and they get the ship destroyed. And it just seems to me that they through a series of plot armor, they've been able to survive as long as they have. But I don't find anything at all aspirational about Discovery. Because I come from a position that the universe is indifferent to your suffering. One day a solar flare can come and wipe out all life on Earth in moments. And the question is, what are you going to do to survive that calamity? If you could. I don't think anybody on Star Trek Discovery would be able to solve that problem unless they put you in their magical spore drive and whisked you off somewhere else. I don't know if that would even save you, but who knows? Sean McCommons is here. Sean McCommons says, "Hi, Rob. As usual, I love your show. However, I thought I would speak up on a topic you discussed on show 565, which was whether Discovery was being anti-Semitic. This is difficult because I haven't watched the episode of Discovery you were talking about, Unification 3, and I don't know anything at first hand about the subject matter, anti-Semitism. However, I would like to say the following. One can be Jewish or Palestinian or anything else. In case you know something is wrong with how Palestinians are treated in Israel. We can talk about history all day long, but it's true. Palestinians are second-class citizens in what was before 1948 their own country. Well, there was never a country of Palestine, first of all. How to fix this? No idea. I just think what you said, where it's a blanket statement that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic, must have a response. So here's mine. Sean McCommons. Sean, I very much appreciate you writing in. I appreciate that. No, here's the thing. Now, this is sort of a controversial point of view, but if you look at how the Vulcan civilization was established, they hired Leonard Nimoy to play Spock, and they brought back Mark Leonard from the first season, who played the first Romulan that we saw, the Romulan commander, to play Spock's father. Both men were Jewish. Then there was Celia Lofsky, who played T'Pau on Amok Time. And Celia Lofsky, I don't know if she herself, she was Eastern European, I don't know if she was Jewish, but certainly her husband was. Now, Arlene Martel, who played T'Pring, who I actually knew, I don't know if she was Jewish, but I think she was. So there was, I think, a conscious effort to create a certain feel, at least when I was growing up, for the first, until the advent of the next generation. When I was a kid growing up, going to Sunday school, being bar mitzvahed, all those things, I told people how my grandfather looked a lot like Leonard Nimoy, especially as he got older. I equated Judaism with the Vulcans. I thought it was a thinly veiled idea, and I'm certainly not the only one. And it's not only because at the time I did not know that the Vulcan salute was the letter Shin. I did not understand that that's where that came from when I was growing up. But I definitely felt that Vulcans were sort of, call it maybe spiritual cousins of the Jews here on Earth. I was, of course, adopted, but I was raised by a Jewish family. I had a religious education. I went to Sunday school. I know I went to Temple D. Hirsch. That's where we belonged in Seattle. Some people would call it Temple D. Church because that's how reform it was. But my family, the Schoenfeld Gardner Foundation, we are the Schoenfelds, did in fact build a synagogue at Temple D. Hirsch. And it was just something that was always with me. And I very much strongly identified Vulcans with Jews growing up. I did. And what I thought was what they've done to the Vulcan culture, especially beginning with Star Trek 09 onward, is, we want to use these buzzwords today. We talk about othering. I mean, what was really interesting to me growing up watching Vulcans in Star Trek is they were kind of the revered elders of the Star Trek alien races that we came across because they believed in logic. And what was so interesting about Star Trek for me is that Spock and his father had this rift between them because Spock wouldn't live up to what his father's wishes were. He joined Starfleet rather than go to the Vulcan Science Academy. But what was really interesting is when you met them, when you met Sarek and Amanda in Journey to Babel from the second season of Star Trek, it was really interesting by the end of that episode that you saw father and son be reunited. And that relationship between Sarek and Spock carried through into the films. Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4, Star Trek 6. And to me, they kept going with that representation. And I think that the Vulcans have really been, of all the alien civilizations that we've seen in Star Trek, they have perhaps been diminished the most by what's going on. And I really thought that their portrayal in this week's episode in Unification 3 was a real slap in the face. And what's going on with the Palestinian-Israeli situation is complex. But if you want to go back to a Star Trek metaphor, if you talk about, say, the Organian Peace Treaty that was established in the first season episode, Errand of Mercy, and as we later heard about in episodes like Trouble with Tribbles, the idea that the Organians put forth was who would best develop whatever the disputed lands were, who would do the most for the indigenous people there, or who would do the most for the civilization there. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to come about, because it didn't say that the Federation necessarily automatically won over the Klingons. You had to, and the idea too that while the Klingons were pretty simplistically villains, they were introduced as villains in Star Trek, and this is one of the things I love about Star Trek so much, is they were not villains. They were antagonists, and while they did things differently, of course, when Kor came down with his men to Organia, he wanted to set up a military dictatorship. He made himself governor of Organia. They wanted that planet. It had strategic importance. But by the end of the episode, you had the Klingons and the Federation, in the guise of Kor and Kirk. They were unified against what they perceived as perhaps a common foe at the time, which were the Organians, who stepped in, revealed their true selves, and said, "Oh, no, no, no. You people aren't fighting on our watch." And you had watched a Klingon and a Federation officer in Kor and Kirk, even though Kirk was disguised as Barona. You had watched these two men develop a respect and almost a camaraderie in the episode. So if they were introduced as being enemies, which they were, by the end of the episode, you could imagine Kor and Kirk going out and getting a beer together and sharing war stories and talking. And I always thought that was as a kid, it always impressed me that that's what we were getting from Star Trek. So I do find, in my mind, perhaps, the portrayal of Vulcans, the fact that they have massively failed themselves and the galaxy. They've turned the Vulcans, again, I said it before, a spacefaring race of proud people that had applied the teachings of Surak to their culture and revolutionized. They were in the throat. They were going down. They were going to exterminate themselves. The Romulans, they took off after the people that became the Romulans. The Vulcans that founded the Romulans, as it is explained, they're not an offshoot of the Vulcans. They're Vulcans who left Vulcan, now Navarre. I just think that Star Trek is becoming too clever for its own good. If you wanted to show that kind of thing, I just think there was better ways of doing it. But the way the Vulcans are portrayed to me really seem like the way, I don't know, I see popular culture portraying Hasidic Jews or Orthodox Jews, and there's not a lot of great press happening there. And as somebody who has just finished, it'll be beginning its festival run in February, a movie that's literally about a Hasidic Jewish family, perhaps I'm more overly sensitive than I should be. But I do think the portrayal of modern Jews in any kind of context is becoming more and more problematic. A lot of that has to do with the way Israel is perceived by certain factions, but that was never my experience. But I did find the portrayal of the internal politics of Vulcan as a Navarre, as seen in Unification 3, to be rather problematic on a number of levels. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be, but it certainly came off that way to me. The Amazing Yosh, or Yosh. I think it's Yosh. It'd be Yosh because it's Gosh. The Amazing Yosh is here. Oh, no. The Amazing Yosh says, I caught up with Discovery Episode 7, Unification 3, and left confused and with a lot of questions. If dilithium was running out, as the Admiral suggested, and Vulcans and Romulans unified, then why didn't the Romulans integrate their quantum singularity drives into the fleet? Voyager alone established multiple means of propulsion: coaxial warp drive, quantum slipstream, transwarp drive, etc. Why were they not used? In the course of 930 years, why didn't faster-than-light propulsion grow beyond warp speed? When Discovery arrived in the future with the Spore Drive, why didn't the new Federation reverse engineer the tech? Adira, the symbiote's host, managed to redesign the Spore Drive, and Discovery was refitted with future technology. I will admit it. I don't understand this universe anymore. After 1,000 years of advancement, the devastation the burn has caused, the Andorians and the Orions are a threat. Where are the Klingons, the Borg, a new threat? Maybe I'm missing something. It's weird, too, that Discovery isn't really integrated with Starfleet. They don't have the uniforms, but that's a little nitpick. And one would think that a new character from Starfleet would help integrate the crew. A counselor, maybe? There's a lot of crying, so maybe someone should replicate a box of tissues and leave them at all the stations. What really bothered me was when Book said that Burnham had a messiah complex. The Admiral specifically mentions that they are sending the sister of Ambassador Spock to visit them, a character that Spock himself never spoke of for obvious reasons. And her mom just pops up into the story again. Why Discovery needs to deconstruct its chosen messiah is a cycle that can't be broken 3 seasons in. There's so much going on with the Burnham character that it unravels all verisimilitude. In this dialogue, there's an internal commentary that is either critical or validating, I'm not sure which. Star Trek has actually gone through this before. During the Berman era of Star Trek, characters would offhandedly mention, when can we go back to exploring, or remember when we used to be explorers? This seems cyclical of a franchise that might have lost its magic. So what are the writers trying to tell us? Why is the Burnham character being forced into canon in such an obtuse way? Why connect her with anybody at all, and let her blaze her own path without the constraints of previous Trek lore? Another question I asked myself in the Post-Geek Singularity: if you took away all the Trek branding and kept the story as is, would it be as scrutinized as it is? Would it have merits of its own worth considering? I see at least 2 realities running headlong into each other over and over again when it comes to Discovery. What the writers are trying to accomplish versus what Star Trek has accomplished. Both sides of the issue can't let go with what is familiar and at the same time try and create something new without colliding into a big mess and then picking up the pieces and trying again. I'm not sure I'm part of the audience that this new Trek wants. I grew up with Star Trek. I've read Dreadnought that you mentioned in yesterday's Robservations. Sad face. It's a little hard to accept, but all good things, ... As much as the origins of the Burn are the mystery for Discovery, for me the mystery is, who is New Trek for? And by extension, will it hold much longer? Or is this the past that Trek will blaze? On a completely unrelated side note, I saw Videodrome for the first time. Long live the new flesh. Warm regards to everyone. Yosh. Well, Yosh, what a great letter. Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know how. Again, the fact that they made Discovery a prequel series to the original series, and now they're 1,000 years in the future. I mean, it's all over the place. It's being rebooted again. And as I said yesterday on the Midnight's Edge podcast, and I've been thinking about this a lot. Here's the fundamental thing that I think I hate the most about Star Trek Discovery. In their desire to go 1,000 years in the future, what I think would have been really interesting is if that future was so advanced and so amazing and so magical that the adage that Arthur C. Clarke said, that any technology that was sufficiently advanced would be indistinguishable from magic. I wish that was the future that they went into, that the future that Discovery found was so magical and so amazing, they just were completely out of place, and they were fish out of water, and they had to go discover this future for themselves. They had to discover the wonder of it all, and they had to realize we're really out of our depth. But instead, they went the easy way, the very, I think the very obvious way. A lot of people have said, well, Rob, you just don't like Star Trek Discovery because that series proposal that you and Bryan Singer and Chris McCory and Jeff Thorne came up with was a little too close to what they did. Well, for those of you who don't know, you can find it online. Look up Star Trek Federation. And indeed, born out of a sake-drenched sushi dinner, I did convince Bryan Singer and Chris McCory that maybe we should pitch a new Star Trek series. And the very premise of that series that we came up with back in 2006 was called Star Trek Federation. And the idea was we were going to go, I said, in the year 3000. I was thinking in my mind 1,000 years, but it wouldn't have been. It would have been like 6 centuries in the future. But the whole premise of it that I was thinking about is what happens when a great idea, like, say, democracy, gets old? And what happens when the infrastructure starts to crumble? And what happens when within that democracy it doesn't grow? What happens, like we said in our series, unification occurred. Vulcans and Romulans, they did reunify. And the Bajorans and the Klingons, they became more like Tang Dynasty warrior mystics. And everything had changed. And yet the Federation was old and crumbling and creaky. And the Federation had lost its way. The age of exploration was over. And the whole point of the show was that how do you take a tired idea or an idea that people take for granted and reinvigorate it? But it wasn't going to be a mess. It was just going to be old. And my whole idea was thinking, what if America was still here? And everyone talks about our infrastructure and getting back to where we were going. And I was thinking, Star Trek, if you want to use it metaphorically, Star Trek was born out of the John F. Kennedy Camelot idea of the White House. Now, I know a lot of people would say, well, John F. Kennedy he was a problematic guy, he cheated on his wife or whatever. Well, individuals are complicated things. We are still animals, and we are still driven by our passions, our lusts, whatever. But that doesn't mean that the ideas that we're trying to espouse or we're trying to build they're better than we are. A lot of people want to take down the founding fathers lately because, well, they were slave owners and they didn't necessarily practice what they preached. But the world was the way it was at that time, and it isn't like the founding fathers weren't onto something. The documents, the things like the Bill of Rights, these were, in terms of human history, transcendent moments. And these were things that had never really existed before. American democracy was brand new. Did the people who came up with it and forged it, were they flawed individuals? Yes, as everyone is. And they were also living in a certain time where there was certain behavior and certain economic institutions and certain things that were going on that were part of that world. And eventually that, thank God, it was all toppled. But, to pillory people who are trying to do one thing and then say, well, what they're trying to do is somehow false because they weren't perfect, never made sense to me. And I just think that I really object to the fact that by making the future that the Discovery went into ordinary, dystopian, it made it like everything else. It's easy to do dystopia, but it would have been so much more fascinating if they took the wild science fiction concepts that we have now. And what if starships were being run by people, literally people who had passed away? Human beings or other Vulcans, and the ship's computers were now actually sentient computers. And they actually were populated by people. The computers were now thought of crew members, and you'd have lifers, Starfleet officers, or whatever that would allow their essence to be put into the mainframe. You didn't have to even go into a computer. You could go wherever you wanted to go. But take really radical science fiction ideas and show us that kind of a future. But instead, they had to give us this, well, pretty pedestrian mystery to solve. What caused the burn? Well, the way they've shown us the burn, it doesn't make any sense. It's not thought through. And ultimately, dystopia is easy. We saw it in Andromeda. We were touching on it, but we weren't dystopian. But still, the idea of going 1,000 years into the Star Trek future to see a different federation, a federation in decline, is not something that was new. And also, it's been a part of Star Trek. Enterprise delved into that with the Temporal Cold War. Certainly, we saw elements of it in Voyager and other Star Trek shows. So, I think, Yash, you're correct. And I think the real problem is, if you are an astute viewer of science fiction fantasy and you've read a lot, the future depicted in Star Trek Discovery is really monumentally unimaginative. And I think that's what's really disappointing. And the idea that you're 1,000 years later and no one's good at anything anymore. The Vulcans can't figure out what's going on. Starfleet can't figure out what's going on. And lo and behold, it takes somebody from the 23rd century to show up, the space messiah, who needs to know what her place in the universe is, so when she finally finds that place in the universe, she can become the great messiah that she is every other episode. And I think that's the problem. It has nothing to do with her sex or her color. What it has to do with is a character that apparently can solve everyone's problems, and then, so they make us emotionally connected to her, they have her mom show up to deal with her problems. And it's very odd. And if you think of Star Trek as a genre, it's like, what show are these people making? And who is it for? I think Star Trek Discovery is an amalgamation of half-baked ideas. And that's what's frustrating about it. Every time they have an interesting idea, it's always half-baked and poorly written. And it undermines everything else they're trying to do. And it bums me out. So, let's see who's next. This one comes from Jim Hart. I love that. Jim Hart, the partner of Richard Chance in To Live and Die in L.A. I know it's a deep cut, but that's what Jim Hart is. Jim Hart says, "Hi, Rob. Long-time lurker, first letter R.E. Connery's Bond influencing Fleming, as was mentioned in the latest Robservations. Bernard Cornwell was so impressed with Sean Bean's portrayal of Richard Sharp that he changed the London-born character's backstory to include a Yorkshire adolescence to account for Bean's accent. Also, he dedicated the novel Sharp's Battle to the actor. Thanks for continuing your channel, but sheesh, it's hard to keep up with all of them." What a great letter, Jim. Thanks for writing in. I love that. You know, I love when someone's portrayal in a book or something then influences the output of that author or something. That's good to know. I'm a huge Sean Bean fan. I really am. I think he's just a tremendous actor. And yeah, thanks for writing in. Ken McDowell writes in and says, "Rob, I can understand you not being a fan of Discovery, and you, of course, have the right to your opinion. I've been a fan of Star Trek since the 80s. My dad used to have the original series playing every Saturday on a local independent UHF network in the area. I watched it with him with wonder and amazement. I didn't always understand the stories they were trying to tell. You know what? I used to understand Star Trek stories, but I don't anymore. I didn't always understand the stories they were trying to tell us, but I enjoyed it with my dad. Then as a young adult, TNG was introduced, and I was very excited about this series and loved nearly every episode. To me, this was a Star Trek series created just for me. I was quite devastated when it ended. This is just turning into a long-winded way of saying, in my humble opinion, every generation is going to get their own version of Star Trek. I enjoy Discovery well enough, but it's not as good as TNG in my humble opinion. But I believe if millennials go back and watch TNG now, they would probably feel as though it were dated. That doesn't mean that they're disparaging something I loved. Yeah, but here's the thing. If I can just break in and editorialize. The fact that millennials feel that something is dated doesn't mean that something isn't good. And I think what's really interesting about Star Trek The Next Generation, it is dated, but it's almost weirdly dated to a period of time that never existed, which is kind of what the original series is, which is always why I've believed that Star Trek, if you were to adopt the design aesthetic of the 23rd century as depicted in TOS and then moved to TNG and take that into the future, Star Trek does not take place in our universe. It's a universe unto itself. It takes place in the Star Trek universe. And they could get away with that. And I think that here's the thing about TOS and TNG. They were universal shows. There was an effort to make them universal for everybody. And yeah, sure, they're products of their time. But I feel that there is no... Discovery is very much... they're writing it and they're telling stories of today, of right now. And I don't think in 50 years people are going to watch Discovery and be like... feel like, well, this show has a lot to say. They're going to be like, why do these people act this way? Well, not that we can't enjoy it, but it is meant to bring a new generation into the Star Trek fan community. By setting their new series in a galaxy in which everything we know and love has changed was a bold move for them to take. I agree. It just wasn't taken in the direction I think really serves Star Trek as a franchise. In completely upending the status quo, they have allowed themselves to take the show back to its roots in a way. They can explore the same themes that the franchise has always reflected on without seeming tired, and if they decide that they wanted to make the show resemble what it looked like before this massive shift, they've given themselves an option to do so. With this latest season of Discovery, the show's writers have given themselves the ability to make a show which is both incredibly true to the spirit of Star Trek while still moving away from the well-worn setting which has made up the franchise for over 50 years. For a potential new Star Trek viewer, this is a pretty cool move, in my humble opinion. A whole new generation will get to have new adventures in their own corner of the Star Trek universe. But are they? Has there really been any adventures happening in this season? Half this season is about Michael Burnham trying to figure out where she's supposed to be in this new place. And the adventures they've gone to 2 scrap planets. And they've now been dealing with Starfleet, and then they go out on rescue missions. There hasn't been really a defining mission for the Discovery. A story where they've gone somewhere, where they've boldly gone, where no one has gone before, and they discover a civilization or a situation that is outside of them. The whole mystery of this season is all Michael Burnham's mystery, which I don't believe. I don't believe that the Vulcans or the Federation would give up and just accept the burn. It doesn't make sense. Star Trek will continue on for another generation and hopefully another after that. And 20 years from now, when CBS creates a whole nother new Star Trek universe, this generation will probably complain it's not their Star Trek. And they'll go on whatever social networking sites there are in 20 years and complain about how this new Star Trek is not nearly as good as their Star Trek. I know this was a long, drawn-out way for me to give my insights into the new series, but I felt like I needed to say it. I love yours and John's shows and watch all the time. Keep up the great work, Rob. Live long and prosper. Well, I want to thank you, Ken, for writing in. See, a thoughtful letter. I like that. But I have to say to you this. My problem is not that Star Trek should reflect the time it's made. I think it already has. Certainly for the first 40 years of from 1966 to 2005 it did. And I think that this weird obsession with making everything, Star Trek 09 wanted to go back to its roots and reinvent. You wanted to take Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and reinvent them for the modern age, which I always thought was kind of odd because Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were created in one age and they grew up. And we saw that. I mean, how often are pop culture characters played by the same actors allowed to grow and change, as drastically as they did in Star Trek Discovery? In Star Trek, the original series. We saw our characters age in real time, and that was something unique and new. And I think that now, and as we watched Next Generation, 25 seasons of Star Trek over 18 years was the Berman era. There's a lot of Star Trek ground covered, and each show was different in its own way. But I think the problem is that with Star Trek Discovery, so often the scripts are all over the place. And I think you sit down, it's not just old Star Trek fans, it's any astute viewer of television that I think has been the older you get, you are aware of the classical forms of episodic storytelling that had to work from episode to episode. And I think what's interesting is there's less focus on, say, plot and the universe and character, and it's more about feelings. And I think the feelings for anybody who's an older or a student of storytelling feels that those feelings are unearned. And, for me, when Michael Burnham's mother showed up and they say that Qowat Milat, she's joined this ninja order of warrior Romulan priestesses, my first question is, wait a minute. Are you telling me that a human being from Earth who pops in from a different time is just going to be allowed into this order to become one of these people? And not only that, wouldn't you think that, as Vulcan civilization works, why would they pick an advocate for somebody who's doing her PhD defense and make that advocate that person's mother? Honestly, do you know what this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery reminded me of? Something I dreaded. My mother going to school and fixing a problem for me. That's literally what happened. That's literally what happened in this episode of Discovery. That is the most anti-Star Trek message I can possibly imagine. And while, hey, it might be great if you are watching some other show, but for Star Trek to literally have your parents show up, what's so interesting is you think about father figures, whether it was Kyle Riker or Sarek, we see these characters usually in some kind of estranged place, or sometimes you have a father like Brock Peters, the elder Sisko, and look at the relationship he has with his son. One of the great things about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I've talked about it before, but they had an incredible depiction of a black family. 3 generations of a black family that loved one another, that cared for one another, and they didn't have to say, look at how we're depicting a single black fatherhood and how Jake Sisko's a model son. They just did it. It was just a part of the tapestry of the show. When Brock Peters shows up as the elder Sisko, that was great too. But this show, I feel like every episode they're telling me as a viewer how I'm supposed to think and feel rather than have the story they're telling elicit those feelings within me on its own. And I think that's bad storytelling. You can't tell me what to feel when you're making a narrative. Your narrative has to elicit those feelings inside of me. And I think that episodes of going, if you went through every episode of Star Trek Discovery, there's so much that makes very little sense. And that's what bothers me. And I think the problem is, in a way, it's insidious because people are looking to Star Trek Discovery and they're like, that's the way to tell a Star Trek story. And I think it does a disservice. I think anything that's bad writing, bad movies, bad anything, because people don't know, and we're losing the ability to discern what's good or bad, much less why. It's like, well, I feel it's good. I like it, and so it must be great. And, you know, I've been criticizing Star Trek my whole life. I mean, I think And the Children Shall Lead is one of the worst hours of television ever made, and it's a classic Star Trek episode. But I'm not beyond going, well, that was terrible, and it was. Andrew J. Rivas is here. Andrew J. says, hello, Robert. I hope this finds you well. So the subject of this email is a bit tardy, and I hope if you see it, perhaps you will find it something worthy of discussing further with your audience. So firstly, I do admire you greatly, particularly your wonderfully calm demeanor, talking about issues that you do not agree with. I know that's hard at times. And I must confess, watching you in a way brings me closer to John Schnepp, whose untimely passing, I say in all honesty, shook me to my core. Let me tell you, thank you for saying that. It was shocking. You know, John was never in the best of health, but I mean, he told me on a Monday when we did Collider Heroes, he wasn't feeling very good. And days later, he was gone. Within that, from Monday to Saturday, there was a slow, steady decline that happened so rapidly, and he was gone. It was shocking. He was a day younger than me. I know that people such as ourselves come from vastly different worlds in the context of America, and yet, as Americans, we have a common ground we can circle back around to finding our footing on. I personally believe this is why pop culture and our mythologies create so much passion within their various fan bases, and for that reason I find myself so drawn to it. And so, with all that said, that brings me to the subject of the email. I was recently watching your video of Season 2, Episode 4 of The Mandalorian, in which you read the opinion piece that the show has gone political in the contemporary sense. While I agree with you, that was an article I read, which I thought was interesting. While I agree with you that there is significant food for thought in the op-ed, I would also say much of the author's opinion strikes me as exactly as to why people voted for Trump in the first place. I would add, I completely understand you did not read it with malice or anything like that in mind. I would hope that you read this as a critique with the understanding that there is no malice in me toward you. I would not cancel you or anything like that. We must be adults and communicate if we're going to function. As to the article itself, some thoughts. I would argue that the analogy of the Outer Rim with Middle America is incredibly tone-deaf. As you know, the Outer Rim of the Star Wars universe is generally considered to be uncultured and backwards, irrelevant, etc. I'm not even a Midwesterner. I can comfortably say that if one was going to reach out to people, this is a poor first step. I would also add that the writer uses words like cult in the article and specifically mentions MAGA by name. I think this is all emblematic as to why people who tend to be on the coasts are so greatly despised, and why I don't believe I'm overstating it with the use of that word by many other Americans. My thoughts on the episode in and of itself are quite simple. I do not see what the author is alluding to as something that is the driving thought process of the show. I believe we put our own thoughts and beliefs into what we perceive, and I believe the writer from The Hollywood Reporter is doing that with this episode. Personally, I have found the show to be stagnant, and yet I know that it's a product of the process of world building, although I believe it's building for other series, which I find to be annoying. After its first season, any fan of The Expanse can attest to that. I think to read into the show this deeply is folly and shows a great level of projection, and I must admit that I believe for a writer who clearly has a particular political ideology, he did quite a good job wrangling his thoughts into a coherent opinion. And yet it's very depressing to find that one side of America, the apparently winning side, is so dead set on in what I can only call lambasting the other. The name-calling of cult-like behavior, which I can say I've seen from both sides, is not a good sign for the progress of America. And this is not to say that one side is saintly while the other fiendish. Quite the contrary. However, one side claims to be set on healing things, and in that spirit I object to the structuring of the article. As to the demonstrating that people read into things however they like, an example of this, the rebels came from the mid and outer rim supported by elites from within the galactic core. They could do so again. Something that is self-affirming can be found in anything, and I personally read that article as just that, reinforcement of how the writers see the world. Funny enough, I saw from the writer a sense of understanding of his opposition, even if I personally believe he doesn't really understand it. He states that the government doesn't appreciate these particular people, and yet he goes out of his way to label them MAGA when all he needed to do is describe them as disaffected people. I personally believe that if there isn't reconciliation, true reconciliation, not one forced upon one side, now that they all think they've won, the Republic is certain to fail. My belief is, don't overthink it. The people of the Rim are right in this case, and they're being ignored, and that is not wise in the long run. We need to do better to one another, and maybe get off the high bantha we rode into town on while we do so. Wishing you the best in all things, Andrew. Well, Andrew, that's a great letter. Do I think that The Mandalorian has an overt political agenda? I do not. I don't think that Jon Favreau, unlike Star Trek Discovery, where I imagine the people in the writing room pick whichever injustice they want to deal with that week, and they want to figure out how can Michael Burnham best represent that injustice, and we'll put it in the script. I think The Mandalorian, look, the idea of poverty anywhere is inherently going to be compared and contrasted with poverty where in front of you, right around in front of you here. And I think the idea that, when I think about poverty in the United States or something, I think about like Appalachia or someplace like that I've seen documentaries on about the poverty. There's incredible poverty here in Los Angeles. You just have to go downtown LA and see all the homeless encampments to see it. So I think when you're dealing with, in the case of The Mandalorian, it's all frontier towns that we're going to, which is then analogous to the Old West. And so there is a lot of things going on in The Mandalorian that people are comparing and contrasting to America, for instance. And I know where that's coming from. But I really, listen, I appreciate your letter. I just think that, here's the thing. What I would appreciate is if more people sort of understood why people perceive others as a certain way. And when it comes to the Trump presidency, I completely understand why there's so many people that support Donald Trump and what they're hoping to get from Donald Trump. But if you really look that during the presidency, other than superficial acts, there wasn't a whole lot going on in his presidency that would benefit the very people that put him into office. We haven't seen a lot of that. It seems like there might have been a lot of that, but if you really look under the surface, there isn't. And I think what everybody gets upset about is, why do people continue to support not just Trump, but anybody that is doing things that are clearly against your own interests? Like, why would you do that? I think a lot of people just don't know. But look, I agree with you in the sense that we're all Americans, just like everybody here is a fan. And the idea that we're taking each other down, that we're othering and making everybody in opposition to us, that is counterproductive. And I think as what I find really interesting is I get in fights with people about, say, modern Star Trek, or they scream and yell at me and they're like, well, the old show's not good. I watched an inane video today where somebody was writing a response to somebody else who's gotten a Star Trek blogger who's gotten himself into trouble, and he spent the beginning of his video talking about how the original series was the Star Trek Discovery of its day, and that's just not true. I grew up. I wasn't there in the very beginning, but I started watching Star Trek in syndication when I was very, very young, when I was in 1972, probably, when it went into strip syndication. And Star Trek is a personal interest of mine, not just as a fictional universe, but as a function of the time that I've actually lived and grown up in. Because Star Trek was always a constant in my life, and I've grown up, and Star Trek has evolved and changed and given me things. And I'll be honest, most of Star Trek, other than the original series, and to a certain extent about half of TNG and maybe 3/4 of DS9 and maybe 25% of Voyager, I've had various problems with other things, but the original series, the reason Star Trek is here is because of the original series. The original series might have had bad episodes, but for the most part, it's been generally recognized as one of the great TV show success stories of all time, albeit not during its original run. And no one had ever seen anything like that before, and it was strange. So all these people that always throw back at me that because I love the original series so much, they always throw back that, oh, it wasn't that great. I'm like, no, it was. And I don't have to argue for it. You can try and tear it down all you want, but it's got 54 years of history that says otherwise. So, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that it is ridiculous to couch people that supported Donald Trump as assholes, or they've got their reasons. I mean, I told people that my mother voted for Donald Trump, and as a lifelong Democratic Jew, I said to my mom, like, what? How can you vote for one thing, Donald Trump, but you're going to vote Republican? And my mom was very simple. She's a one-issue voter. Her only income that she gets is from the money she saved in the bank. And since Trump was president, her amount of money doubled. Now, my friend Dave Hargrove and I had a long conversation about that. He's like, yeah, but your mom, she can't, being a one-note voter is not right. And I'm like, look, my mom's 81 years old. And that is, everybody's concerned with the life that they have in front of them. And my mom has to make sure that her life is maintained. And if she didn't have the money she had, then she would starve, then she would rely on us. And she knows that her two ne'er-do-well kids couldn't keep her in the life she's accustomed to. I'm like, Mom, I can't pay for that country club membership. I'm sorry. But, and my mother shocked me when she said she was going to vote for Donald Trump. And she said during his presidency, the Dow Jones and the stock market, they've all gone way, way up, and I've made a lot of money. And I'm like, for my mom, I'm like, that's a pretty tangible reason to vote for somebody. And it wasn't my choice, but I understand why she did. Her logic was flawless. And it's like, okay, but then I'll have another conversation with Dave, and he's like, well, yeah, but what about all the injustice and all the things that are happening during a Trump presidency? I'm like, I know, but my mom wanting to vote for her bank account to stay higher is not something that's preventing anyone else in the world from not getting the justice or having the life that they deserve. And, I just think we're all Americans. We're all fans. We just have to treat each other better. And why not have some discourse? Why not have some discussion? Why do we scream and yell all the time at one another? This one is from Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's written before, believe it or not. Dear Rob, I hope you're well. The Terminator's back. I was having an interesting discussion with Tom from Midnight's Edge in regards to Dune. It was initially about the potential age rating, and then later the possibility of it being seen as a miniseries instead of a film. I got a few questions resulting from this chat, although I warn you it's a bit of a mouthful. What are the chances of it being R-rated? I don't think so. After the script I read, I don't think so. I know you previously acknowledged it'll probably end up being PG-13. It will. But percentage-wise, what are the chances, if any, it'll end up R-rated? It depends on how much on-screen violence there is, I would assume, and how graphic the sex scenes get. But I don't see as it would be. I read the Dune script a while ago, and I do feel like there are certain scenes which seem a bit graphic for a PG-13 rating. I know that you and John Campea have previously said in similar contexts that you can get away with a lot from a PG-13 rating, but I do feel there's definitely a bit of potential of it having a mature rating. There is, I think. With the success of Warner Brothers' Joker being the first R-rated movie reaching $1 billion, and it even surpassed the PG-13 Star Wars Episode 9 film, I feel like Warner Brothers can make money out of this with a mature rating, especially with a superb cast. The real reason Blade Runner 2049 was domestically unsuccessful because of the marketing, not age rating. I would also go so far as to say is that Blade Runner has always been a cult movie, and they gave it a budget like it's the second coming. And most people in the general population are like, Blade Runner, It's that boring Harrison Ford movie, right? After he did Indiana Jones or Raiders of the Lost Ark. Denis Villeneuve has acknowledged that the film is creatively successful enough for Warner Brothers to give him full creative control of Dune. I do not know if parents will allow their kids to watch PG-13 films in the post-pandemic world by the time Dune comes out, so I don't really think a lower rating will help that much. This leads to my next question. What are the chances of Dune ending up with a simultaneous release similar to Wonder Woman 1984? I would say they're getting better and better all the time. Studios currently are not producing a lot of revenue at the American theaters, even though they are reasonably okay overseas. One way to circumvent this is to start investing in streaming services where HBO Max really needs a boost. This is one reason why Wonder Woman 84 is having a simultaneous release on both theaters and HBO Max at the same time, with my personal speculation that sometime the same thing will happen with Godzilla vs. Kong, and it really is looking like that's going to happen. I suspect Dune to undergo a similar scenario to significantly boost HBO Max and to sustain high subscription numbers. There'll be a loss in the short term, but good investments in the subscription service itself overall. I know it has been an expensive budget, but I don't see an alternative. Delaying the film will increase its expenses similar to No Time to Die, and I don't see theaters heading to pre-COVID levels anytime soon. What are the chances of... I agree with that. I don't know. It depends. I mean, they're still working on Dune. I know it's a big screen epic film, so I'm hoping to see it there, but who's going to the movies now? It might be academic. Everything's going to go to streaming. Maybe. What are the chances of Dune being formatted as a miniseries instead? I don't think it's going to be reformatted. Tom suspected that it was possible that they might stretch out the film to be seen as a miniseries as a form of investment for HBO Max. From what I understand, this iteration of Dune has been conceived of as 3 films. Dune, Dune Messiah, Dune, Dune Prophet, and Dune Messiah. Is that right? Yeah, Dune, Dune Prophet, Dune Messiah. And it was going to tell the entire Paul Atreides story. That's how I've come to understand what this Dune is supposed to be. But again, I don't know. Like you said, well, the Sisterhood TV series, all that. You previously mentioned that Warner Brothers was planning a trilogy for Dune to outline the rise and fall of Paul Atreides. They would be called Dune, Dune the Prophet, and Dune Messiah. Yes. In a post-pandemic world, is this still the plan? I don't know. I think it's going to be based on how well the film does. What will the structure of these films be like in terms of the book adaptation, since Dune Messiah is the shortest book of the original saga? Tom said you mentioned that the second movie would cover aspects of the second book, whereas the third film will be the entire remainder of the second novel. If the trilogy, that's kind of what I've heard. If the trilogy is a success, because they've only done the first, so basically the second film would be Dune Prophet, which would be the latter half of Dune. So what you're getting Dune and Dune Messiah as a 3-part film, as far as I understand. If the trilogy is a success, can we expect an adaptation of the remainder of Frank Herbert's novels? Man, I would love that. I would love to see God Emperor of Dune. I would love to see Chapter House Dune, and I would love to see Heretics of Dune. How cool would that be? Just do all 6. If that were to happen, it would be a great science fiction series to behold. They already are adapting Brian Herbert's book, The Sisterhood of Dune, for HBO Max, so I feel like they're gradually expanding the Dune franchise for the visual medium. That might be true, but it's still not Frank Herbert. Do you have any new juicy rumors for either Dune, the movie series, or the TV series? I don't. Dune news has remained stagnant for a while, so it'll be good to hear some production updates, even though it does not officially come out for 9 months. I wish I was part of the test screening where Dune was allegedly hosted a month or 2 back. Here's hoping the release date will be pushed to earlier in the year. Last time you promoted my Dune article, and it actually gave me a couple of views, so thank you for that. It's not against the Robservations rules to promote the same content twice, is it? Nope. If not, here's my Dune article, which I'd carry on promoting around. Well, I'll be happy to share that in the live link. Here is the letter or the site, the article. So here you go. If anyone's interested, go ahead and read this. I remember it being good, so check that out. It's in the live chat. Thank you for reading, and I hope you have a great day, Mr. Burnett. Keep up the great work. Well, I want to thank you, sir. Thank you, Arnold Schwarzenegger, for writing in. I'm a huge fan of your movies. Can't wait to get my new special edition of True. What am I saying? Not True Lies. Total Recall. Can't wait to get that. Looking very forward to it. This one comes from Anthony Choice. Anthony Choice says, "This is more of a suggestion for a show or project than a letter, but feel free to read it as an introductory letter to the idea. Circa 1971, renowned sci-fi author Jerry Pournelle had a granule of an idea, a vision really. The idea wouldn't reach its first fruition until 3 years later when it was finally published as a book, 2020 Vision, from 1974. The book is an edited anthology of collected short stories about our future present, their then future yet to be, written by the marquee sci-fi authors of the period. Toward the end of Pournelle's preface, he says to the book, he wrote the following. This book, though, is a book of predictions. It was designed that way. It's not, of course, primarily a test of power of science fiction writers to predict the future. It is, after all, intended to be entertainment. At the same time, 2020 Vision gives us a unique opportunity. We will, many of us writers and readers, be around in 2020, medical science being what it is, assuming that anyone will be around in 2020. By then, probably nobody will give a dang what we said here, but the authors of this book hereby serve notice that we will buy a drink at the 2020 World Science Fiction Convention for each and every reader who brings with him a copy of 2020 Vision and points out briefly just where we went wrong in our visions of the future. The ground rules on this book were simple. Each author had to write a story which he truly believed could take place in the real world during the year 2020. There were to be no benevolent Alpha Centaurian social scientists landing on Earth to solve our problems, unless, of course, the author really thinks the Alpha Centaurians are coming in the next 50 years, and that they'll be able to give a damn about saving us when they get here. That time he spoke of is now, a window in time rapidly coming to a close in only a matter of weeks. My suggestion to the Post-Geek Singularity, the show, and to Rob is to take a quick reading and perhaps discussion thereof in answer to the open call and invitation from those many decades past by Pournelle and his peers answered when? Under the shadow of COVID, but what might have been kind of came and went, but with a blip, didn't it? The reality we're all living in, by every count, is to sure be a compelling work of dramatic science fiction if such ever existed. Rob, Post-Geek Singularity, and Oh So Wise, Mods of Magic and Mayhem. I love that. What are your thoughts? What a good letter, Anthony. I'll be curious to hear what anyone says. But yeah, it's a pretty wacky sci-fi time that we're all living in. It's very odd. I mean, it's very strange. So let me jump over and see what you guys are talking about over in the Chatterooski here. Let's see what that's all about. Jeff Yerke's here, which means Jeff Yerke's wife is here. I hope the missus is doing well, Jeff. Not that you're not. But I can't get to your letter yet. It just was the one that was there. So, hey. Let's see where I'm at. Oh, wow. Willow. Let's see. People became members of the channel. Ux Media Broadcast became a member. John Orchard became a member. Grand Wazoo 42 became a member. And so did David Wells. Thanks for becoming members. I'm going to start releasing members content soon. The first of which will be my drunk Moonraker commentary. Willow says, I was going to complain that the Free Enterprise trailer suggested that there will be a lot of William Shatner when he actually wasn't in the movie all that much. And I wanted to know who's to blame for misleading marketing. Laugh out loud. Oh, come on now. He's in the movie more than people think. You know, he's definitely a guest star in his own film. He's in the movie for about 20 minutes, and the movie's basically 2 hours long. So, what is that, a sixth? And from a percentage standpoint, what, 15% of the movie or something? But yes, I didn't make the trailer. I like the trailer, though. So, yeah. Willow goes on and says, how do you feel about the ethics of the episode Son of Moog, where they permanently wiped Kern's memory and altered his features without his knowledge or consent? Terrible. I hated that. Bashir was adamantly against saving Bryle's life at the cost of destroying Bryle's selfhood, but didn't seem to have any issues with doing arguably the same with Kern. I completely agree. I think that is lame. Do not like it. Alexander Wilson's here and says, I was watching the Roland Martin show, and the state of Georgia is pushing an initiative where you have to have a car registered in Georgia with proof that the car registration tax was paid to be registered as a voter in Georgia. That is Jim Crow, just awful. Yeah, what they're doing, they're trying to suppress voters. They're trying to suppress black voters in Georgia so they don't come out and vote for a Democratic candidate so they can tip the balance over on the Democrats' side, which is just gross. It's just gross. And it is Jim Crow. It's terrible. Emil Johansson says, Rob, could you come up with something that I potentially disagree with so I can have an excuse to appear on your show? Emil, that's funny. I dislike episode 7. I just don't care about modern Trek, but I feel those opinions are just not that far from yours. Well, I think we'd have a better show if we dissented, but I like the idea. Do you dislike the prequels? I like them. I can debate that. I do, actually. I think the prequels are bad movies, but good Star Wars. And I like a lot of the stuff that's in them. But for everything that I like, there's always some really bad shit in them. Those actors are so underserved. They don't know what to do, which is a bummer. Samir Durrani sends in a tip and says, Hi, Rob, hope you're doing well. Recently, the trailer to Revolution of the Daleks has dropped. I watched it. Just wanted to ask your thoughts on the trailer and your hopes for the upcoming Doctor Who New Year's Eve special. For me, the trailer looked... let me go up there, part 1. Epic. I especially love the scene where we see the two Daleks move towards the Prime Minister in Downing Street. That scene felt quite iconic to me. It was very cool. I agree. I thought it looked cool. I mean, I've liked modern Doctor Who, some seasons more than others, but I wish, they would figure out what it is they really want to do with this character. And I feel like the most underserved character on the modern Doctor Who is now in this storyline with our female doctor is the Doctor, him or now herself. And I've always felt that way. Emma is here. Emma Bannon is here. I love Emma Bannon. She's always refacing some craziness with me. Makes me look better than I look in real life. So thank you for that, Emma. Hi, Rob. Is it worth me watching Star Trek Discovery? Or should I save time and just hit my head with a brick? Following that, what would you say are some of the best 4K transfers you've come across in collecting physical media? Well, that's a good question. I've said on the show that I think my favorite upgrades as far as 4K goes have to be those physical media discs that are derived from photochemical films. Blade Runner, Die Hard, Christopher Nolan's movies. I mean, they look incredible in 4K because it's a whole different aesthetic. So I would go the new what is the new? What am I thinking of? I'm drawing a blank right now, but that's what I like. The Aliens, when they do re-releases, Predator is much better, and they just look better. And when I'm buying home video, that's all I care about is that they look great. You want them to look great, and you want the films to look great. So, and Blu-ray has pretty much done that. Devin Hilton sends in a super chat and says, did you hear that many famous lost silent films are maybe in Cuba? I have heard that, including London After Midnight. I read about it, then nothing. I agree with you. I heard something about that as well, and that makes sense to me because, we were, hell, if you are a Godfather fan, we were going to set up casinos. Hyman Roth had a deal cooking, and that Johnny Ola. So anyway, yes, that makes sense to me, and God love the Cubans for doing that if that's the case. Can you imagine if they're well stored? How much? Oh, that would be amazing. I hope it's true. Anonymous says, can you imagine a time traveler from 1090 AD solving the political and social problems of today? No, I cannot. Meet Michael Burnham, not only an insubordinate, unrealistic know-it-all on her ship, but now revered on many planets. Give me a break. Oh, I'm with you 100% right here. Absolutely. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, I hate how clearly inept the disco crew is. When Stamets says something about being dysfunctional, it's kind of our thing. That's the wackiest ship in the fleet. I ask friends who like it why they do. They can't explain it. They see flaws, but it doesn't bother them. Yeah, I know. I don't like it. Canada here says, Rob, you are talking to an international audience. We're not all Americans. Yes, Canada, I do know that, but I'm just using it being in America as an example because if that's, I mean, I never know. One of the reasons I did this show with Dieter Bastian is because he's got his pulse on all the releases in not just Germany, but the Europe, like the Europe as a place. And he's been able to hook me up with some. So that's worked out. And I love finding out what's being released all around the world. So I'm very aware, and I grew up going to foreign films, so I'm very aware that my audience isn't necessarily American. And I apologize. Jeff Yerke writes in and says, hi, Rob. Mrs. Y says, hey, well, hello, Mrs. Y. How are you? And we're hoping you had a good Thanksgiving. We did. I don't have much to say today except that I'm grateful for your channel and on towards looking to the book and design competition. Yep, that'll start tomorrow. I'm going to have, maybe I'm going to have the rules up, so we shall see. We shall see. You know what? I think I'm going to bring this episode of Robservations to an end. I have many... I didn't mean to do that. I have many letters to read, things like that. And I'm sorry, Canada here reminding me I'm talking to an international audience is a very cogent point to make. But anyway. By the way, I didn't say live long and prosper from the Yerk Man, which I should have. Jonathan Aldridge sends in a super chat. Thank you, sir. Do you think that the Yoda in the prequels and the original movies is better than the Disney Baby Yoda? Yes, I do. But I mean, look, technology's come a long way, but you can't deny that the original Yoda is amazing. Benson sends in a super chat. Oh, thank you very much. Rob, thanks for showing me your Eagle collection last week. I really enjoyed your analysis of Discovery, and I could not agree more. If you could create any Trek series, what would it be? Well, as I told you, we were doing Star Trek. We did Federation. But if I could do any Star Trek series now, I think I would just try and go forward and do something in the Star Trek universe in the 26th or 27th century, probably pre-Burn. And, I think I would like to show a Star Trek show that was dealing with the changing face of technology and the human relationship to it, and how we would deal with losing our humanity in the face of things like life extension and extreme, with the Borg technology, you could apply it to live forever or whatever, and how people it'd become fashionable, just something to do with how people would be changing, fundamentally changing, because they now have a foothold in the universe, which they didn't have before. I mean, they still did in the old Star Trek shows, but even a more of a foothold. I don't know what that would be. But it would also involve exploration and traveling around and meeting new life and new people and things like that. Jonathan Aldridge says, do you think that Baby Yoda in the prequels and the original movies is better than Disney Baby Yoda? I already asked that question. You already asked that question. I already answered that question. But yes, I do. You know what? It slipped back. That's why. But yes, but Baby Yoda is look. Baby Yoda has a very different function in this show than Yoda did in the movies. I mean, Baby Yoda is somebody that needs to be taken care of, even though I suspect you don't really need to take care of him, but you kind of do. And whereas the other Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back was introduced as a wise, sage-like guy who was amazingly advanced, wise beyond his years, and so it's almost like you're getting two sides of the same coin, which is very different. And I like to see that. I think that's what makes the portrayal so interesting. It is, in fact, good stuff. I really like that. I'll see where it goes. Are they going to make the transition from the child to Jedi Master? I mean, I don't know, but I'm looking forward to finding out if they do. I think that's pretty interesting if, in fact, that's the direction that they go in. and I don't know if it will be. Let's see. What have we had? What have we have here? What do we have here? Jason Cornez asks about turning the show into a podcast. We're dealing with that. I set up things at one point and didn't really, sort of fell away from it, but definitely it's something that we're thinking about because I get asked about that all the time, and we really should. So this letter comes from Ryan. Let's say Ryan. Hey Rob, when I started watching your show, I just moved to LA and I was getting started in the film industry, and now I'm something. I've been struggling with the idea of being recognizable in my career, and it kind of gives me an alienating feeling I'm not sure most people can relate to. But it's meant a lot to hear your rants, and I just wanted to reach out and let you know how much your show means. Your opinions are spot on, and your taste is impeccable. My favorite rants are when you talk about your time working on the Warner Brothers lot. It's made the whole process of being here in Los Angeles seem relatable. It's also really cool when you recommend movies that I never would have checked out otherwise. I think the audience on YouTube probably feels the same. I watched Star Crash last week after hearing you talk about it, and it was fucking awesome. Thanks. That comes from Ryan. Ryan, I agree. Thank you for watching that. I appreciate that. What is it like to, I'll tell you something. I don't think of myself, I know people talk about YouTube celebrities and like that. I don't think of myself as, because I'm just sitting here talking to you on my computer. But you do get recognized in the real world. Like the first time I think it ever happened, it happened when I was at a Coldplay concert with Elizabeth. People come up to me. It was before this show started, and I was only on Heroes, and people have recognized me from the John Campea show. But it doesn't really bother me. I don't think you don't get that famous. And I think a lot of people, it's one thing to see people on YouTube, and it's another thing to see them in real life. And I think that if you ever get into a position, if you're going to do your own YouTube show or the thing you were talking about doing that I didn't reveal, I wouldn't worry about it. I think for the most part, it's been a positive experience. But then again, I don't go many places except the places I like to go, and I've been speaking at San Diego Comic-Con for a long time. I just like meeting people, and for the most part, most people are really nice. If people recognize you, they come up and they have nothing but effusive praise, and they're showering you with compliments, and being, for the most part, really nice. So if you're ever in a position where you find yourself recognizable because of your job, because it's in entertainment, I mean, I'm not saying if you're like Brad Pitt, if you get to that level, it's a whole different ballgame. But if you've been doing something that people might recognize you for that isn't Brad Pitt worthy, all I can say is just be gracious, smile, but engage people in such a way so they know that you're engaging them. Don't be like, "Hi, thanks, man, I appreciate it." Just stop for a minute. Go, hey, I really appreciate that. In my case, I wind up in 4-hour conversations with people, but you don't have to do that. But I do think that if anybody takes the time to come up and tell you they like your show, it's always worthy of a response. And it's always worthy of a response where you stop and you look at somebody and you say, "That was really nice of you to say." Or you engage with them. Don't do it in passing. "Yeah, man, thanks." And I'm not saying if you're, if you're late for your flight or something, then you could be like, "Listen, I'm late for my flight." Just if you're going to be in a position where you're interacting with the public at large, I think that part of the job that you have is to be nice. So this one comes from Marcus O. I think. Hi, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is meant as a little thank you letter for the countless hours of entertainment Rob, your co-hosts, and the members of the Post-Geek Singularity provide me with. Thank you to all of the imagination connoisseurs out there. I'm also writing this in the hope of telling a small part of a story that hasn't yet been heard. All right, well, here we go. Let me take another drink. I'm Marcus, a guy living in Bavaria, Germany. I stumbled upon Robservations sometime in early 2020 when I was watching movie-related shows on YouTube, and I was a newly acquired pastime of mine. Yes, I'm definitely late to that party. What distinguishes your channel from the myriad of other geeky channels is your approach to discussions and your political beliefs. I I came across far too many shows in which my opinion spread various degrees of right-wing... I came across far too many shows which, in my opinion, spread various degrees of right-wing ideology under the disguise of fandom. For me, as an ex-special education teacher, this is a no-go. Your channel's tone is much more respectful and mature. That's why I decided to stick with it. First and foremost, I want to thank the always enchanting Elizabeth for the countless times she put a smile on my face. A perfect remedy for someone suffering from depression. The chemistry you two share is amazing, and it makes for a very enjoyable watch. Please allow me to state the obvious. You're a very, very lucky guy, Rob. Here's hoping for at least another 100 episodes of whining about movies. Additionally, whining provides me with a long list of suggestions for movies to check out. I just recently bought Tootsie, which will be shipped alongside the 4K set of The Elephant Man. Unfortunately, the UK Arrow release of Zardoz seems to be sold out. Oh, that will make Elizabeth very sad. As this illustrates, I appreciate variety in the movies you choose to whine about, so please don't shy away from more obscure movies or titles from Hollywood's golden era. While I might not be representing your main audience due to my general indifference toward modern CGI spectacles and superhero movies, I nevertheless would like to suggest a movie. Ooh. How about the 1970s Valerie and Her Week of Wonders? I do not have this. I assume that you have the Criterion release in your collection. I do not. I own the Criterion DVD twice, the US Criterion Blu-ray twice, the UK second-run DVD, its Blu-ray counterpart, and the German limited edition Bildsterung DVD, which comes with the soundtrack CD. You, my friend, you need to watch our movie, Let's Get Physical Media. You would fit right in. Right in. Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. Oh, okay. In your honor, I'm picking that up. Which comes to the soundtrack CD. As you can imagine, it would be interesting for me to hear what you have to make of it. Although some of the Post-Geek Singularity's geeky topics might be a bit over my head. I've learned quite some interesting facts from what Rob casts and whinings. Your knowledge of movies and the business is truly amazing, and your insights and comments make for very interesting shows. Nevertheless, I have to nitpick or offer a correction. On your whining episode about Phantasm, you mislabeled the black 1971 Cuda as a Hemi-Cuda. It is, in fact, labeled, you're not the first one to say this, as a 440 plus 6. This is also obvious by the hood, as all Hemi-Cudas had shaker scoops instead of the regular sport dual scoops. Yes, Phantasm 2 completely shattered verisimilitude by featuring a sport hood Hemi-Cuda. You're right. Well, what can I say? I'm a bit of a CUDA connoisseur. I do actually own a genuine TX9 black 1972 CUDA, which is pretty close to the Phantasm series 70-71 CUDAs. So if Dieter, for whatever reason, ever decides on doing a crossover between the Secret Exchange and Phantasm, some guy in Bavaria would be happy to help him out with a fantastic vehicle. Oh, so you do watch our show. Speaking of your new partner in crime, well, let's get physical now, hee. I actually own a Vinegar Syndrome DVD containing that very title. Don't tell anyone, though. Damn, that German An American Werewolf in London box set definitely is nice. Unfortunately, I missed it. How come a German imagination connoisseur misses a German release of that caliber, you ask? Well, Rob, I have to tell you the ugly truth about some German physical media releases. Apart from some serious censorship issues which can be circumvented by getting the Austrian releases, hence my copy of Eden Lake, German releases often have the downside of containing a 100% localized version, which means that the video track is derived from a master featuring only German language versions of titles and text inserts. Although these are arguably small details, it completely ruins the immersion for me. Just to tie this back to whining, I take Amélie, or the Fabulous Destiny of Amélie Poulain, as an example. The first edition German release featured an option to switch between French and German. The subsequent remastered release did not offer that option to my knowledge. Thus, every occasion text appears on screen, it is in German only. This annoying detail has been very widespread on German DVDs and Blu-ray releases. Hopefully 4K releases are not affected. Consequently, I decided to mainly focus on buying UK and US releases. This nitpicky buying habit leads me to the conclusion that I'm also, to a lesser extent, of course, a physical media junkie. Oh, yes, you are. So when did all this start? Once upon a time in 1991, I contracted the physical media virus by means of CD purchases. Roughly 25 years later, my interest in music waned. At the time, I thought it would be a good idea to get rid of my whole collection. Big time. Oh! As I should have expected, my interest resurfaced sometime in 2018. I've recently rebought some CDs of my all-time favorite Italian dark wave electronic band, Curly and Camera. I know Curly and Camera, along with some select few other CDs. As you're fairly well-versed in 80s music, it would be interesting to hear if you ever came across Curly and Camera's body of work. Okay, I believe I have Curly and Camera on a compilation CD somewhere over there, but I don't know them by name. I only know that, I don't know their songs or anything. I just know the name of that band. And it seems very familiar to me, but I just don't know them. So I'd have to go look into that. But what a great name. You know, when I was growing up, Curlian photography was like a big thing. Yeah, look, it's the aura of plants. So Curly and Camera is a great title for a great name for a band, along with some select few other CDs. As you're fairly well versed in 80s music, it would be interesting. So the band, albeit with several changes of their female vocalists over the decades, is still creating new content, while their classics like 88's Eclipse and 85's Blue Room, that's the thing that, yes, that's the thing that sticks in my mind. That name, Blue Moon, are still being played regularly on German goth dance floors. For the official video of Blue Room, see this link with the best available VHS rip. Ooh, I'm going to put that in the live chat. Curly and Camera's Blue Room. I'm going to put it right down here. Here you go. Paste. There it is. So it's in the live chat. Go to that link and see Curly and Camera. My love for music on physical media also translated to movies. In the late 90s, I bought my first PC DVD drive. This opened the floodgates with constant curation work due to space restrictions and evolving personal taste. I'm currently around 1,900 DVDs, about half of which I additionally own a Blu-ray, and some on 4K as well. Once I get aware of a Blu-ray or a 4K release of the movie I already own on DVD, I need to get it. This isn't even the strangest part of my addiction. Hold on to your seat. I'm still watching all of my movies on DVD through my ancient PC. So all my Blu-rays and 4Ks are still pretty useless as of now. How crazy is that for an imagination connoisseur? That's so weird, dude. But you know what? I think it's very German, so good on you. Well, I would argue that it doesn't impact much of my own enjoyment because my immersion stems from the atmosphere and the emotional connection, which isn't tied to the size of the screen. There is, unfortunately, an enormous downside to this. It completely prevents me from inviting people over to watch movies together, so even without social distancing rules, I've been rather distanced from fellow imagination connoisseurs. Have you gone to one of the Richards watch parties? You should. I'm hoping to change that in the near future as I'm going to get myself a 4K setup early next year, which means that I have to curtail my media buying habits from now on. In closing, I would like to hint at an interesting topic to be discussed on Let's Get Physical. In the past 5 years, there's been a shift towards manufactured on-demand content, on recordable media. For example, recent Warner Archive DVDs are only available as MOD DVD-Rs, many of which have not been released on Blu-ray to my knowledge. That is true. I have quite a large amount of these classic back catalog titles, so I'm a little concerned that I might end up with a lot of decaying DVD-Rs due to recordable media's shorter lifespan. I don't have a backup strategy in place yet. Knowing that both of you at least have some BDRs, I would be interested to know how you deal with MOD content, which comes from an inferior recordable media. With that, I'm going to end my letter and wish you and the whole PGS all the best. Stay safe and have a better day and night. Marcus. Well, thank you, Marcus. What a great letter. Thank you for the effusive praise. I appreciate it. You know what? I don't really think about it much. I have to tell you, I still have the very first CD I bought in 1983, which is Billy Joel's Greatest Hits, and it works. Now, I know CDs are different, but it still works. Now, a lot of my laser discs suffered from laser rot, oxidation, because of the way they were made. They were two pieces of plastic glued together, covering up a piece of metal that had the information on it. And when the glue would separate, if the glue wasn't good, the metal where the information was stored, the pits, would oxidize. And it would wind up with, well, sometimes the image would go away entirely, but noise. So, I buy things. I know I've got a couple of video-on-demand titles, and I keep them, and I haven't had much of a problem with them. But I don't think about it other than the fact that if I go to watch it and it's no good anymore, I'll either go buy another one or go, or replace it. But I haven't had a problem. Other than with Laserdiscs. Laserdiscs are a problem, but I've never had a problem with CDs yet. Cross my fingers. I was just looking at my Aha album Scoundrel Days, which is their follow-up to Hunting High and Low, and I was like, man, I must have bought when I don't even know when that came out, but I bought it like the week of release, and I hope it still plays because I loved Aha's album Scoundrel Days. I don't know what that means to any of you, but I certainly definitely like that record. Wow, there's a letter for Let's Get Physical, which I won't read. So there you go. Let's Get Physical, which I'll save for next week. This is Keith O'Neill writing in saying, "Hey, Rob, I've seen your criticism of the current state of Star Trek. As a comic book fan, yeah, I also sympathize. I'm sure you've probably heard here and there how comic books, specifically Marvel, have taken a dip in quality as well as sales this past decade. It seems like some of the writers and the artists and others who work on comics put their own politics ahead of good storytelling. For example, in a recent issue of Captain America, Sharon Carter in the Iron Patriot armor fights Selene. As she's nailing punches on Selene, Sharon's dialogue box on the page says, 'Yas, Queen, yas!' Then Selene disappears. Sharon says, 'Damn it.' The next narration box says, and I kid you not, 'Karma for cultural appropriation.'" Really? What the heck does that have to do with anything that was going on? I personally don't mind if a comic is political as long as the story is well told. Yes, Watchmen, The Dark Knight Returns, Civil War, and Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams' run on Green Lantern and Green Arrow all had political aspects to them, but they were all well-told stories first and foremost. That is something that creators these days need to know. Sure, there are dumb fans who take things too far, like when writer Nick Spencer got death threats when the Hydra Cap story Arch, and Captain America began, obviously should never be tolerated. However, not everyone who dare criticizes a comic series is a troll. Does demanding a better product make someone a toxic fan? Not in my book. Your thoughts? Thanks, Keith. Keith, well, you know what? I don't think so. I can't imagine. Here's my thing when somebody starts telling you something, like, you're this, you're that. Well, what's so weird to me about it is they've put themselves in this position of judging you. And it's so weird because people are multifaceted. Somebody didn't like a tweet that I made today, and I said, sometimes I don't think that whatever I tweet is necessarily a tacit acknowledgement that I agree with what I'm tweeting. Sometimes I find articles that I don't agree with, and that's the reason I tweet them. Or I just tweet things that I find interesting. I mean, whether it's a newspaper article or something. You know what? I was watching, believe it or not, Michaela Peterson's podcast with her father, Jordan Peterson. Dun, dun, dun. And I watched he came back and they did a podcast together with a black writer, young writer, he's 24, who writes a lot for Quillette, which is a online publication that I frequently read. And because there's interesting articles there, and whether it's so funny, they're like, well, you're in a right-wing leaning site. I'm like, well, I go to all sites. I mean, I read all kinds of things, and it doesn't mean anything other than the fact I'm reading an article. It doesn't make, it's so weird. And so people think that, oh, you're giving an approval of this person. Well, the Jordan Peterson thing fascinates me because watching the rise of the intellectual dark web and everything that happened there, people were branded like Peterson. Like, you read the story that came out last week that people that worked at his publisher were crying that they're publishing his new book. I mean, his first book, The 12 Rules for Life, it's so bizarre to me. For those of you who don't know, the first rule that Jordan Peterson lays out for life is that you keep your room clean. Well, that's a metaphor, but it's also an actual true statement, I think. You know, my office, my old office up at, for the most part, up in Aries Studios it was full of stuff, but it was very organized. And every time I walked into it, I went, oh, I like being in here. And organizing your life, having a room, if it's your bedroom or whatever, that it's organized, it's just a better place to stay. And he has been, because of what he was talking about, compelled speech, he was branded a transphobe and all these things. And what's so strange to me about that is they're completely misconstruing what he was saying. And he was never talking about, he was not being transphobic. As a matter of fact, he's often said if he was dealing with somebody who is trans, he has no problem calling them whatever they want to be called, or somebody who's non-binary. His point was about compelled speech. And I think that gets lost. I think in the conversations that we have. But so I was watching this podcast last night. It was really interesting. And so this black writer wrote for Quillette, really, really smart guy, young guy, 24. I forget his name. I think it was Douglas Coleman. What was his name? Douglas Coleman? I didn't know much about him. Apparently he's not well liked, but he was a very articulate guy. And he made this interesting point that I never thought about. He was talking about something. He said, this is a very unpopular opinion and people don't want to discuss it. And he said, look, there's all this talk in academia now about how our culture is supremacist. The culture of academia is inherently supremacist. The tests that were being administered and all that was inherently coming from a place of white privilege, and that they were all inherently racist. And his point that he made was, well, if that's the case, how come Asian students, and frequently Asian immigrant students, that were coming from a non-Western culture, and these tests were not written with a bias for them in mind, how come they're smoking everyone else? How come Asian students and East Indian students that come from India to study over here in America, how come they frequently smoke white people, Caucasians? And the point he was making is that that seems to fly in the face of logic, that there's institutional racism that created these tests. And apparently that was an unpopular opinion. And I found that fascinating. And it reminded me, at least, that what I find annoying about culture now is nobody wants people discriminated against, other than, real douchebags. But for the most part, I didn't grow up in a household where my parents, like I've said, they never said a bad word about anyone else. It didn't matter who they were, race, color, creed, religion, sexuality. My parents never said a bad word about people. And I think for the most part, everybody does, in fact, want equality for everybody. Nobody wants people to be victims. And we're better off living in a world where everybody is happy and free to pursue whatever it is they want to pursue. And I firmly believe that. I think the problem is that the world, again, the universe, is indifferent to your suffering. And not everybody is created equal in terms of their innate talents, gifts, abilities. I mean, look at people of different heights. There's an obvious difference. They're different heights. So, there are things that people who are taller can gravitate towards, but then there are also things that people who are shorter have an advantage. And rather than, what I don't understand is we should have a civilization that helps everybody achieve based on what they want to do, based on their own physical gifts. And I've always believed that. And I think, why not help people? I've told the story frequently about when I was in Bulgaria working on Hills on Red, this girl that ran the bar at the hotel that I was staying at, that I was hung out in, her and her boyfriend, she was really good at her job. And I asked her, I said, you really run this bar well. Do you want to stay in this bar? What is it you want to do? And she said, my boyfriend and I want to open our own cafe. And I said, oh my God, you should totally do that. What a great idea. And she looked at me and she was like, oh, you can't do that here in Bulgaria. And I was like, well, why? Well, people just say you can't do that. You're not allowed. And I was like, and she was surprised I would say that you should do that. And I think that the great strength that America has is that if somebody here in America says, doesn't matter who it is, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, it doesn't matter what religion you are, if you say something and you go, I'd really like to do such and such, there are people that are going to say, that's awesome, you should totally do that. What can I do to help? And that's been my experience. I want to do this. People are like, yeah, let's do that. Or I've had friends that said, I want to do this thing. Okay, man, what can I do to help you? And I think that's a great strength that America has as a culture for everyone, that you can just think stuff up and do it here, and you can find people that will help you. And I think that's an amazing thing. And I don't think a lot of us avail ourselves of that aspect of our culture. A lot of people think, I can't do that. I don't know. And now people could be saying, well, Rob, you're speaking, of course, from a position of white privilege. Try working in Hollywood for 30 years. I mean, every single person gets beaten down and demoralized by the Hollywood system. It doesn't matter what color you are. It's a horrible... Hollywood is an equal opportunity destroyer of dreams. Now, that doesn't mean people don't succeed in Hollywood. They do. But let me tell you, Hollywood can destroy anyone's dreams, no matter... It doesn't matter how successful you are. You're Kevin Costner, you win the Academy Award for Dances with Wolves. Now look at the critical response to The Postman. Look what happened to his directing career after that. It's just, and he's like a messianic white guy. Field of Dreams. I mean, not messianic like Jesus, but I mean as a white example of Hollywood. And then, of course, he gets crushed by the system. And that's what I think is good about the country. But when it comes to what's going on now, I don't understand that there's all of these people that are proceeding from this position of they know more than you. Don't you know that you're born into this racist system, and let me educate you about that? Well, what makes you think that I don't know about it? And as a matter of fact, what's even odder is that more progress has been made in the last 50 years than in the last 500 years of human history, and we were on a good path. And now it seems to be derailed. And it's so strange. It's bizarre to me. And with comic books infusing, aren't comic book characters inherently social justice warriors? Superman fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. They fight for everybody. After 9/11, the superheroes that they did superhero comics were not fighting for equality for a certain group. They were fighting for the equality of all of us. And isn't that what superheroes are supposed to do? I mean, they've always kind of done that from the beginning, but it's very bizarre. I mean, Black Panther was created in 1966, and it's great that we finally got a Black Panther movie. Now I'm getting this backlash from people. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't that good. It was ordinary. It's CG. It's like, you know what? If I was an 8-year-old black kid and Black Panther came out, imagine what it would be like for that kid. I can only imagine what it would be like for me if I was 8 years old, an 8-year-old black kid, as fervently ensconced in loving science fiction, fantasy, horror, and comic book movies. The fact that they made a Black Panther movie, I would have been like over the moon. It would have meant the world to me. And I think people forget what true representation can do for people. Not representation that bangs you over the head, but just representation, the fact that they made a Black Panther movie. One of my favorite online videos is these guys responding to the Black Panther poster. One of their friends is filming them, and they're talking about, this is what white people get to see all the time in terms of representation on a movie poster. Think about it. Think about you go to a movie theater, how many white faces adorn movie posters? Now, what would it be like if you're a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and you're black, and you walk in and you see that Black Panther poster? First of all, that poster was badass. Some Marvel posters I don't like, but some posters like Black Panther, pretty fucking cool. Now, if I walked in and I was an 8-year-old black kid, I would have been like, that's the coolest movie poster I've ever seen. I need that on my wall. I mean, as it stands, I do have, to be fair, I did buy the Wakandan throne, and Shuri is sitting in my Wakandan throne. And I did have to get once I found out that Killmonger was coming with Michael B. Jordan's face sculpt, I'm like, oh, I got to get that. But I think, that's what's important, is you can't tell somebody about representation. You can't tell somebody how to be politically correct. You have to show them through your work. When somebody says, take that for cultural representation, it's like, oh, dude, that's terrible. First of all, it's bad writing. It'll be dated in 5 years. Maybe it'll be dated in 6 months. But like you said, man, true inclusion is just what it says. It's including people. And when you include them and you make great characters with great stories that interact with other characters, you shouldn't have to say that you're being inclusive. You just do it. And you write your characters, you make them great characters, and you tell great stories with them. And if you want to be inclusive, if you want to be inclusive and be politically correct, well, don't bother telling us that you are. Show us with your great work. And I promise you, people will come. People will come, Ray. People will definitely come. But yeah, the comic book, I don't know what comic book creators are doing now. I mean, it's so weird to me that you're reading this stuff, and it's weird because it puts them, I go, this is not good writing. Why don't you write good first? Write good first. No, you got to write well. And make your characters and your stories great. And if you don't, that's on you. But yes, and look what's happening in the comic book industry. I mean, my shelves are filled with great comic book work, and a lot of it is very socially relevant. And a lot of it is the people that are writing it don't have to tell you that it is. They already know it is, and that's why it's great. So let's see. I've got, I have time for one more, I think. Or wait, let's see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Claudius is here. Rob, did Canada here just ask for an apology? Rob, we're Americans, and in America, we don't apologize. Apologies are for Canadians. If Maple Leaf wants an apology, he can stick his head in my microwave where I'm warming Cheese Whiz on white bread. Well, Claudius, yes. Benson's, I'm still trying to think about, I want to give you a specific example about what kind of a story, a Star Trek show I would. I mean, if you look up Star Trek Federation, that's where we were going. Mr. Moondragon sent in a super chat and says, "Hi Rob, what was your first hot toy? Mine was RoboCop Flight Pack. I paid double the price because when I found hot toys, it was sold out. My first hot toy is, you can't really see him. But my first hot toy was my George Lucas figure when Hot Toys was new, and it was called The Director because they didn't have the rights. So that's what he is. I mean, let's see if I go wide. I don't know if you can see him. The angle would allow you. Yeah, you can't see him. He's actually right in the back, right behind my Seven Samurai. I've got George Lucas on this side, and then Tom Cruise's Nathan Algren in the back there. So, yeah. Well, wait a minute. Can you see him? Can you see him on this? You probably can't see him on this angle yet. No, you can't. I'm sorry. But that was my first hot toy that I got about 20 years ago. Claudius said, "I'm sorry, Canada. I'm all hopped up on bottled Coca-Cola and margarita pizza from DeFara's Pizzeria on Avenue J in Brooklyn. You're feisty today." Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in a super chat and says, I love agreeing and disagreeing with you. Oh, that's what I like to hear. You should. That's the way to be. Michael Burnham Throg. Hello, Throg. I disagree with everything today. You'll hear from my lawyers. As soon as I find a dumb enough one or two. P.S. You need to watch the HBO Max show, The Undoing. I want to see it. It's David Kelly, based on a book. I want to see it. Well-written show. Keeps you guessing. Plus, I think Nicole Kidman got new knockers. See ya. Oh, boy. Throg, are we giving away those Dawn of the Dead box sets? Man, they are tasty. Ocean H has subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Ocean H. Jonathan Aldridge sent in a super chat and says, I think white privilege is a term offensive to those whose ancestors have worked hard for their descendants to have the opportunities they enjoy. I agree. You know, I mean, it's I agree. It's all very weird to me. It's all very weird. Look, I think it's true. We've never had, especially if you're a black American, you've never had it. There's never been equality here. Maybe on paper there was supposed to be, but black Americans have never been treated the same. I mean, I still can't get over that black soldiers were not allowed to avail themselves of the GI Bill after World War II. But things change. Society is changing. I mean, there are things that are different now, and it's an evolutionary process, and it is changing. And you know what? That evolutionary process that we had going on, it was working. It was working. I mean, ask any gay couple that's married, male or female. Ask them if they ever thought there would be same-sex marriage as the law of the land in this country if they in 1995. Ask them that. And look at how that changed. It takes a while. The fact that magic mushrooms have been decriminalized in Oregon. Who would have ever thought that would happen? We are moving forward to a more verdant and just society. And I think that the last, 10 years have really derailed us. But, we'll get back on track, I hope. And the world's just a better place when people are all working together. The more opinions that are out there, the more experiences that are out there, the better off we all are. It's not about, the whole thing is it's not about your skin color. What it's about is the experience that you had having a skin color and your experience of the world and what that taught you and where that led you and what you know because of it. That's what's really important, is the voice, that people give voices to their experiences so others understand. And that's what true inclusion is. That's what it means. That's what people want. And it's not enough just to have people with different skin colors in places. You have to understand where they came from, how they came from there, why they came from there, what happened to them, what was their experience in life. That's the important thing. You've got to get those voices heard. People have to be heard. Ziggy became a member of the channel. And Jonathan Aldridge, you already read that. Claudius also goes on. Claude says, Rob, since Michael Burnham Throg brought up Nicole Kidman, I need to ask, did you watch The Killing of the Sacred Deer? You know what? Eliza Views watched The Lobster, and I bought that on Blu-ray. And I have his first movie, but I have not watched Killing of the Sacred Deer, and I really want to. I probably want to own it because I'm a fan. I am a fan. Was Dogtooth his first movie? I think it might have been. I don't know if that was his first movie, but that's the first movie I bought on Blu-ray. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls from across the 28 known galaxies, however you identify, whatever kind of a person you are, if you are a non-binary person playing a female on a Star Trek show that's carrying a trill inside you, my God, what happens when you wake up in the morning? I don't know. Who are you? Who are you? And you're going to lunch and you're talking to your former trans boyfriend at lunch, even though he's not there. Can you imagine? What are you going to do? You redesign the spore drive. And apparently you don't tell anybody else any of the other ships that you need. But you know what? You're still welcome here because everybody is. Everybody is welcome here. And by the way, I really like that character, to be honest. I always bang on Star Trek Discovery. I like Adira as a character. I like the actress. I think the actor, they do a great job, I guess. I don't know. I think it's they. I don't know. But I think that they were a great addition to the show. I would like to see more of that character because that character obviously worked for Earth and knows a lot about what's going on. I'm surprised that they don't. Well, I'm not surprised that she's not there, but I would think she would be. I keep saying she. She's a she on the show, but she's a non-binary actor playing that character. See, it's all very confusing. But I really like that character, and I want to see more of that character. Because wouldn't their insight be crucial to every mission Discovery goes on? I would think that would be something that would be, you'd want that character. Adira's got to be on the bridge the whole time. Oh, at least I would think so. Anyway, Jean-Luc Picard sent in a super chat, and Richard sends in a tip. Richard says, wow, Discovery has found a way to make post-apocalyptic Star Trek universe really boring. Every episode, Discovery jumps in. Trek race is xenophobic, but Trek race has asinine social problem. Michael Burnham solves it. The contempt for the audience is clear. It's true. I agree. Every Michael Burnham gets a trophy no matter what happens on that show. And with that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle people, kind souls across the 28 known galaxies, however you identify, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching the channel. Thank you for the great letters. I haven't even got through all of them yet, but this was a fun show. Remember, I would like to reiterate the invitation. If there are anybody of you, any members of the audience that would like to take me to task for anything I've said, I will invite you onto the show and let's talk about it live. Write me a letter. I know it's a little tough to be live on YouTube, but if you really, if you think, as many of you probably do, that I am, as was sent to me on Twitter, a gatekeeping twat, that's what I get, rather than send a meme out, which I do appreciate getting tweeted to me, why not come on the show and let's discuss it? By the way, I don't think using the word twat necessarily serves your case very well. While I think it was kind of funny and laughed at the meme, there are people, perhaps members of the planet Earth, that might object to that terminology. So when you're calling me a gatekeeping twat, I don't know. Some people might find that problematic. But I do invite you to come on the show. And we'll talk about it. Let's have a discussion. Let's put it to the test. Let's involve the Post-Geek Singularity community. And you know what? Again, if my opinions are those of a douchebag, again, probably shouldn't use that term, but then by all means, take me to task. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. Remember, the deadline for the film festival, we got a deluge of films in, is tomorrow at 11:59. As long as you get your entry form and your entry fee paid, you can have until December 15th. That's the day. That's not December 14th at midnight. That's December 15th at 11:59 p.m. You can get your film in by then. So make sure your upload times that you've got that, because on December 16th at midnight, all the portals close. So you can't upload your film anymore. And how this is going to go, because people have asked, how it's going to go is on from now. Actually, I'm starting now until probably the 20th of December. I'm going to contact filmmakers whose films are semifinalists. And I'm going to ask, I would really like to do, whoever can, via Skype or Zoom, mostly Skype. I like Skype because I can record off it easy. I'm going to contact the filmmakers, and I want to do some interviews with you about your films. And on Christmas Day, there's going to be a long pre-recorded show that's going to have hopefully all the filmmakers talking about their films, and then the films will play, and then I'll come back and introduce another filmmaker. So I'd imagine it could be a 2 or 3 hour show. I don't know yet. And then the films are going to be judged, and on New Year's Day, Elizabeth and I are going to be doing a live whining about movies and present the awards for the first Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. And also, I would encourage everyone over the next month to watch all the films that have come in. There's some really interesting films, a lot of diversity in the films that we've been getting. I've been very surprised and delighted by the films. I want to thank everybody in the community. And it is true, tomorrow we will be accepting entries for the new contest that we're going to run is for our anthology. We're actually going to publish a book that is correct called The Imagination Connoisseurs. And the theme of the book is, what is an imagination connoisseur? What does it mean to be an imagination connoisseur? What kind of a story does an imagination connoisseur like? So if you like a horror story or a science fiction story and that's what you want to write, that's what you can write. We're leaving it all completely open. It is going to be a contest that is open from now until Valentine's Day. And we are also running a contest for the actual cover of the book. The book is called The Imagination Connoisseurs. It's going to be a standard hardcover, like this, where I don't know, but this is the actual size. I don't have it all. I promised I was going to get it done by December 2nd. I'm going to try, but it's going to be a dust jacket like this. So however long you gotta, because we're going to make it like a real book. And also, I don't know even about the actual book itself, but designing the dust jacket, because that's the idea is to print a book. Hopefully a slipcase book, special edition book. Now, here's how it's going to go. In terms of ownership of the stories, all we're doing is licensing your work to put in the book. And everybody, if we sell the book, you'll have revenue sharing and all that. But the story remains your story. We claim no copyrights over your work. We just ask that you give us, when you enter, that you give us the ability to put it into the book and sell the book. But your stories are yours. So if somebody wants to buy your story and turn it into an animated series or a TV show, we claim no rights over that whatsoever. So I want to be very clear about that. Your stories are your own. We only ask that, like the film festival, although a lot of people didn't quite understand this must be an original story that has not appeared anywhere else. It must be original. And it can't have appeared anywhere else. And this is something that's become problematic. I don't know if I was so clear. People don't read the entries. I mean, that was what the Imagination Connoisseur Film Festival was supposed to be, because the whole idea was to inspire people to pick up cameras and shoot. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't been delighted by the films that have come in. A lot of them, and you're going to see the difference between a world premiere and a special selection film. A special selection film, by definition, could not be in competition. So it couldn't be, and that was part of the festival awards, or the rules. So I'm really excited about this, publishing a book. I think it's going to be really, really cool. I'm looking forward to the entries. I know that over the next week, you're going to see a deluge of things coming out of the film festival, because like I figured, we're going to get hit with people are going to work on these up till the last minute, and by God they have. God love you all. Anyway, I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank the Richard. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank let's say the Richard first. Greg Smith has stepped down as a moderator. I want to thank him for his tireless service. He's an old friend of mine. He's done a great job. He's busy. I understand. You can't hang out and do this forever. I get it. And I want to thank him for that. And I look forward to seeing him again. He's a great guy. And I want to thank who's here today. MC Blackcap, Joshua Levesque is here. Robert Pariso is here. And they do a great job. They make the channel what it is. And so the Richard's always still running watch parties and things over on the over on our website, both the Post-Geek Singularity website, Facebook page, and the Whining About Movies page. And I also want to remind everybody, all the letters I read are up on the website at theburnettwork.net, and if they're not yet, they probably will be. There's even some letters I haven't read that are up on the website. Go to the website, that's theburnettwork.net, and you can find a lot of letters up there and a lot of other content and other things. So check that out. I want to thank everybody who's become members of the channel. The first thing that you will get for your membership is I'm going to drop my drunk Moonraker commentary. Also, The Tango Shalom trailer will be coming out soon when members will get a first crack at seeing that. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. And your memberships are going to help us do things like print books because I don't even know how much it's going to cost to print a bunch of books, but I'm sure it ain't cheap. But anyway, I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel via letters, via super chats and tips and all that. Remember, tonight for 100th episode of Whining About Movies, we are doing Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill 1 and 2 because Bill is the man. Bill is the man. So join us. I can't believe we've done 100 episodes, but we have. Incredible. And, of course, if you haven't checked it out yet, check out our new show that I do with Dieter Bastian, Let's Get Physical Media, because I think it's a lot of fun, and it's fun to do. So check that. The 3rd episode is just dropped. Episode 4 is in the can, which I've got to edit. So a lot of exciting stuff. Anyway, on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say, as always, have a better day.